357 mag versus 45 ACP+P in short barrels. And what we have today is our Corbon DPX ammunition, which stands for Deep Penetrating Expansion or Expanding. These are solid copper hollow points. Our 357 Magnum is a 125 grain rated at 1,300 feet per second. Our 45 ACP+P is a 185 grain rated at 1,075 feet per second. The energy ratings are pretty similar, 469 foot-pounds with our 357 mag and 475 with our 45 ACP+P, but you know, that's likely through longer barrels, so we might get some interesting results in even more comparable numbers, or maybe even the 45 would be more powerful of these short barrels. So it should be an interesting test. I'm using my 2-inch barrel Taurus 605 to test the 357 Magnum, and my 3.3-inch barrel 45 Shield to test the 45 ACP+P. There's almost exactly identical amount of bullet travel in both of those guns, because you know you're counting the barrel with the chamber with the 45 ACP. That's how a 3.3-inch barrel is going to be measured, with the chamber in there, as with the revolver that doesn't include the chamber. So they're almost the same amount of barrel travel. So we're going to go through the chronograph, see what kind of velocity and accuracy we get at the same time. Then I'm going to do my 10% clear ballistic gel test. So I'm going to go on the plain 10% clear ballistics to see what the best potential of those are, because sometimes fabric alone will clog hollow points. You can never get to see what that hollow point is supposed to look like expanded, especially out of short barrels. So I'm just going to go into plain clear ballistics, and then we're going to do a real world simulation test. 4 layers of sweatshirt material on this first 3-inch piece that represents hitting a pectoral muscle, followed by a 1/4-inch medium density fiberboard that represents hitting ribs or sternum, 16 more inches of clear ballistics, and another 1/4-inch MDF at the back to represent hitting back ribs. Clear ballistics is roughly a half representation of the density of flesh, so if you see like 16 inches here, that's more like 8 inches in a real living target. And then after our ballistic gel test, I am going to shoot at the steel target to see what kind of practical accuracy and shootability I can get with these. So let's get started with this test. All right, first up, we'll run our 357 Magnum 125 grain solid copper hollow point. It's rated at 1,300 feet per second, probably through a 4-inch barrel, something like that. Let's see how close I get to 1,300 feet per second through my little 2-inch barrel here. 1267, 1239, 1233, 1227, 1222, so a bit below that rated velocity. Obviously that's a very short barrel. Our 45 ACP 185 grain DPX rated at 1,075 feet per second, probably through a 5-inch barrel. Let's see what I get through my little 3.3-inch barrel here. How close I get to 1,075. 973, 1008, 982, 971, 990. So yeah, close to 100 feet per second below. So that's to be expected. Let's hit our ballistics gel block and see how these two compare. All right, we'll do our first shot in the plain 10% clear ballistics just to get the best potential of these hollow points. So no fabric that could potentially clog the hollow points and prevent expansion. No rib simulation that can slow down its potential for penetration. Let's see what we get here with our 357 Magnum. All right. Now let's hit that with our 45 ACP+P. Let's go take a look. Wow, I was not expecting to see what I'm seeing here. The 45 did not expand in our best potential. Our 357 absolutely did expand. It has a huge amount of energy dump and tearing and cutting. So it expanded out, and those petals, you know, you can tell they stayed open because they cut a huge path with that 357 Magnum, and we went to about 19.25 inches of penetration. Huge amount of energy dump in this first 3-inch piece, all of that. But when we look at our 45 ACP, I mean, no expansion at all. It went into maybe about 7 inches and started tumbling around, and it went to about 17 inches. So you can look at it in a positive light and say it is a 45. It didn't overpenetrate and beat a big bullet. It's going to cut a lot of damage just from being a big bullet. But if you actually look at the way it damages compared to an actual cutting solid copper hollow point, I mean, the 357 did significantly better. And I'm pretty baffled about how that 45 failed this. So let's put on our fabric, put in our rib simulation, and see how these do in our real world simulation. All right, our real world simulation, 4 layers of sweatshirt material, followed by 3 inches of clear ballistics to represent hitting a pectoral muscle, followed by a 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard to represent hitting ribs or sternum, 16 more inches of clear ballistics, and another 1/4 inch MDF at the back to represent hitting back ribs. And you got to remember, again, this is a half representation of the density of flesh. So whatever you see in this test is going to be about half that far in an actual living target. So let's hit this with our 357 Magnum, see how it does. All right. 45 ACP plus P. Let's go take a look. All right, so not much different results here, and we can tell that just by looking at this first 3-inch piece here. With the 357, you can tell that it expanded out really big before hitting this, and with the 45, you can tell that it did not, because there's just a straight line there. And if we look at our rib simulation here, it appears our 357 is expanding out at least that way. It may have tumbled through, as where our 45 just poked through straight. So looking here at our 357, you know, it looks like it expanded, but sometimes it's hard to tell what that expansion looks like. It does look slightly inconsistent expansion, but there's still a ton of energy dump, and there's still a lot of tearing right here. And we went to about 14 3/4. Now, when we look at our 45 ACP plus P, not much energy dump there, but once we entered the block, it looks like it started to expand right about here, because the way the striation cuts are means it did start to expand a little bit. And it didn't do terrible, but the expansion is very minimal, just the nose expanded. And what we got there is about 13 1/4 inches. So looking at this, obviously our 357 Magnum did a little bit better here. Both were pretty easy to shoot, and that is one reason why in the past I've picked this 357 Magnum as the choice that I would pick for defense when it comes to, you know, a 357 Magnum out of a snub, just because the recoil is manageable enough, and it does pretty good with that solid copper hollow point for getting expansion and penetration. It looks like through our real world simulation, though, it's not great. I've seen better performance. As well as our 45, I mean, that doesn't look that good at all to me, honestly. So let's pull these out of the block. We'll take a close-up look at these bullets. Then I'll shoot our steel target and see what kind of practical accuracy and shootability I can get with these. All right, so here's a close-up look at these bullets going through plain gel, our 357 Magnum and our 45 ACP. So our 357 did actually break off a couple of those petals. Looks like they had 6 petals. A couple of them busted off. Overall, this isn't that bad. It did do what its name says, is deep penetrating and expanding. But yeah, that's not great performance, but it's not bad. A 45 ACP, just absolutely no expansion, not good performance. Now, if you look at things a little bit differently and say, you know, it tumbled through, if you look at the width of that bullet versus the expansion of that 357, you could potentially cause more damage with this, because, you know, being copper and having a large hollow point, that's every bit as long, if not longer, than a 230 grain, but yet it destabilizes and tumbles. So in that respect, it probably would do well, but it's just not performing the way we want it to predictably perform. Going through our real world simulation here, 357, 45. This is weird. We had some petals, 4 petals, bend out just like right here with our plain gel shot. But the other two petals, instead of breaking off, they folded up and inward. So that's kind of interesting. And then our 45 ACP versus through plain gel, through our real world simulation, actually performed better. So looking at that first 3-inch piece where there's just a straight line, you know, it's easy to tell that, you know, once it hit the rib simulation, then it did this. Which, I mean, that's not bad in a lot of ways. You know, you get a 45 caliber hole going through a pectoral and then hitting ribs and then expanding. It's still going to do everything you need it to do, basically. It's just not nearly as predictable as what you're going to get with more velocity, like with the 357 Magnum. So I would say our 357 Magnum is acceptable. Not great, but acceptable. As where our 45, I mean, you can get much better rounds that will expand every time. So I wouldn't pick that. So that's a close-up look at those bullets. All right, so I want to do something a little bit different today. I've had a lot of people complain and say, well, your groups do real bad at 7 yards or whatever they say, and not realizing this is 42 feet away, which is 14 yards. And I'm also not doing groups. I'm just like getting the quickest front sight picture as possible and popping them off and seeing, you know, how those hit. So I thought, for fun, why don't I just try to do some groups? 14 yards, just see how I can group these things slow fire. So let's see how these do. Our 357 Magnum. Dead primer there. Or hard primer. I swear I get more problems like this with Corbon than any other ammo. Yeah, hard primer. I'm gonna fire single action here. All right, so other than that first flyer, you know, we got about, one's about that far away. So not great grouping, but it is a little bit flinching on my part going on. 45 ACP, let's see what this does. All right, not great, but not bad either. For, you know, 42 feet away, I can group them pretty much. I could probably spread my hand over that. So it's not the worst I've ever seen, but it's not competition level good either. It's okay. So interesting ammo looking at this overall. So I have in the past recommended this DPX 357 Magnum out of a snub, and the reason why is it doesn't feel like a 357 recoil, and it shouldn't because it is pretty light. So it feels more like a really warm 38+P or something like that. So it's a 357 mag, but you know, it's manageable enough that I would feel confident carrying it. And it usually expands pretty well. So overall, it's doing everything I want it to do with less recoil, and that's why I've picked it. It's a nice, clean shooting round. But today, looking at this, having another hard primer issue, I'm not sure what to think about that. Now, our 45 ACP, I thought for sure we would get some great expansion with this because I'm thinking it's rated at 1075, and I knew that we would probably shave off 100 feet per second going to this short barrel. But I thought, you know, being just shy of 1,000 feet per second, and these are copper hollow points already kind of pre-segmented out, ready to go, I thought there's no way that's not going to expand, but they didn't. That being said, I think there's worse options for 45 ACP. I've seen a lot of rounds that are heavy for caliber, 230 grain, and they'll just very much over penetrate, won't expand and over penetrate really bad. Full Metal Jacket does kind of the same thing. As where these, being light for caliber and having a hollow nose, they're not going to over penetrate that bad even if they don't expand. So I would say they're okay. I wouldn't recommend them. I would recommend something else, but if you could get your hands on them and that's all you could get, I'd feel pretty confident in them, just because solid copper, they're going to go through hard barriers well. They don't over penetrate, and it's a 45 caliber hole even before it starts to tumble or wobble around. So that's going to be pretty effective. As we're at the 357, I'm rethinking this a little bit, because it didn't seem like it performed as well as it did in the past, and we had that hard primer. So interesting results. That's what you get today. So as always, comment, share, and like, and thanks for watching.